Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this is the iPhone 12 Pro Max. I've been using it as my main phone for the past week or so, and wanted to share my overall thoughts with you, whether you should pick one up, whether you should stick with the smaller size iPhones, or maybe stick with your older phone this year. Now, the first thing is, this entire video is being recorded in full auto from the back of the iPhone 12 Pro Max camera. I'm not using an external microphone, and this time I'm recording in 4K 60, but not in HDR. So I did the iPhone 12 Pro video in HDR, and this one is not, so more people can see what it's like, and it's in full auto. All I did was hit record after setting it on a tripod, and I'm using the microphone and everything from the phone itself. Now, the first thing is the price of the phone. We get 64 gigabytes extra storage this year for the base price. So $1,099 will get you 128 gigabytes of storage, and then you can go up to 512 if you want to for about $1,400. It's not necessarily a value, but you are getting extra storage for the same price. So that's a really nice thing to see this year. And then also, of course, there's the design. The design is a design that I really like. I'm glad they went back to the squared off edges, but that makes this phone feel huge. And everyone I've shown this to has said the same thing. They're surprised that even if they've been using an 11 Pro Max, when they pick this up, they're surprised how big it feels. The squared off edges do make it a little bit easier to grip, but it's super huge. In fact, it's so big, I may stick with the iPhone 12 Pro this year. Now, there are advantages to this phone, so we'll talk about those in a moment, but the overall size is big, it's taller than the 11 Pro Max, it's also slightly heavier, and if you're using a case, it just makes it that much bigger. It's easier to grip, though, because of those squared off edges. I think it looks and feels more premium, and then, of course, you have that new Pacific blue color, and this is graphite, and you have gold and silver, so I think it's a great look for this phone. We went back to the iPhone 4 style, and it's something I've been wanting for years, so I'm glad they did it. Now, the next thing is the cameras. The cameras on this phone are really great. In fact, the main camera is a 1.6 aperture, which gives you really shallow depth of field. And I think for many pictures, you don't even need portrait mode. So for example, here's a photo I took of a flower, and it looks really good with natural background blur or bokeh. And then here's one in portrait mode. And the one I took in portrait mode, I don't think looks as good. If you get nice and close with your camera to that subject, I think you're gonna have enough background blur that it looks natural, looks good, and professional as well. And so I think that's a great feature of this camera. That means the sensor itself is actually on a float instead of the lens sort of floating around. And we see this in larger mirrorless cameras. The cameras I've normally used, a GH5 and A7S III from Sony, all have sensor shift stabilization, or IBIS. And what it does is puts that sensor on a float, and so when you're walking around, it sort of centers itself to try and give you stabilized footage. Now, in my test, walking down a trail, it looks pretty good, but I don't see any noticeable improvements over the iPhone 12 Pro. Now, that may be because they have a larger sensor and a larger lens, so it was better to do the sensor stabilization instead of the lens stabilization. But either way, it looks good, it's stabilized. I don't know that it's a huge advantage over the 12 Pro, for example. They look basically the same, and of course you have night mode, so that kind of makes up the difference using the processor. But you do have LiDAR, or laser autofocus basically, in the back of the phone that helps you get better focus at night, better depth, and it's just great for things like not only depth sensing here, but also augmented reality. Now, of course, you have a regular camera, a wide, and a telephoto. This year you get a little bit extra telephoto with the larger camera as well, 2.5 optical zoom, and then up to 12x sort of zooming into the sensor and digital zoom. So it looks okay compared to the 12 Pro. You get a little bit of extra length. It's still kind of blurry, but at the 2.5, it's pretty nice, and I think it works well. And of course, you've got portrait mode on all of them and night mode on them as well for night mode portraits. Now with the cameras, of course, they're incredible cameras, and I think we're going to see even more with Apple Pro RAW that's coming out with iOS 14.3, it looks like. So we should see that in the future with more data from the sensor, 12-bit of data or 12-bit depth, and it should be really interesting to see what we can do with that later on. Hopefully in a month or so we'll see that update. Now, other than that, we've got some crazy computational photography going on here that really makes everything just look sharp, including this video. Everything's in auto, like I said, and so you're using the new A14 Bionic, which has a new neural engine in it to help even more with that computational photography and other tasks. and it's got 6 gigs of RAM in this phone. So it's just super fast all the time. There's no slowdowns, and it's really just a smooth experience, what you would expect from iPhone. And so there's no compromises here. If you want the best, the fastest, get the Pros with the bigger RAM. They're super fast and will be updated for years to come. Probably at least 5 years, like we're seeing with all the other iPhones from years past. Now, the display on the 12 Pro Max is 6.7 inches. It has a very high pixel density. It's OLED, and it has great viewing angles. It goes up to 800 nits of brightness, so it's easily viewable in sunny weather, and it goes up to 1200 nits when you're playing HDR content. It has very vibrant colors, it's very deep blacks, and it does use PWM. So for those of you concerned that the screen actually flickers, what that means is the screen is always flickering to control brightness, except at the very highest brightnesses. So the screen is flickering. You can't see this with your eyes, but at 240 frames per second slow-mo, you can see that it's flickering, and this can actually bother some people and cause headaches. However, with the 12 series lineup of phones, since they all have similar OLED panels, I really don't experience this problem. I have no eye strain, no headaches caused from the display, but this may be a concern for some people. Now this here we also have ceramic shield, which makes the phone 4 times less likely to break in the event that it's dropped. So the glass is a little bit stronger. However, you still will get scratches on it like any other glass. So I didn't find that it was any better at preventing scratches than the 11 Pro Max, at least in my experience, because the iPhone 12, for example, had a scratch on it and I'm not even sure where it came from. I've been very careful with these phones. The 12 Pro Max doesn't have any scratches on it, but if you're concerned about that, be sure to put a screen protector. However, it seems to be a little bit less likely to scratch compared to last year's, but still, it's glass, and if you have something that's a little bit harder than glass, you of course will be able to scratch it. So just keep that in mind, and definitely get a screen protector if you're concerned about it. Now the speakers are nice and loud. They provide nice wide audio, and at the highest volumes, they go about 2 decibels louder than last year's iPhones from what I've found. However, at those high volumes, it is a little more tinny sounding than last year's. I think there's a little bit more bass or depth to the sound with last year's iPhone 11 Pro Max. Maybe that's due to the frame design, but I do find that these are clearer at higher volumes. See, we have the launch pad, the Finder icon, Safari. Everything has a little bit of a refresh. Music has been updated to match iOS 14, and so things have been refreshed quite a bit. The dock also sort of floats. It's no longer attached to the bottom. So I guess it doesn't really matter that most people aren't going to be using them at those high volumes, but in general, they sound great and have a great wide stereo sound, and it's great to watch videos on. If you're watching HDR content, it's an amazing experience, especially if you're using headphones such as AirPods Pro with spatial audio. I think that gives you the best experience. So most people will probably be using AirPods or some other wireless headphones anyway. Now, as far as the battery life, well, I know that's a major concern for a lot of people. This year's battery life, I'm personally getting about an hour less time than I was with the 11 Pro Max. It just depends on your usage, though. In some tests, such as that from Aaron from Mr. Who's the Boss, he just ran a standardized test where he got more battery life with the 12 Pro Max. So this really comes down to how you use the phone. But in general, I would expect about 10 to 11 hours of screen on time with normal use. I was getting up to 12 with the 11 Pro Max. Now I'm getting around 8 to 11, depending on the day and what I'm doing. If you're recording a lot of video or you're playing a lot of games, it's going to be less, of course. Now you do have fast charging, so if you need to bump that back up, even though it's a smaller battery, you can still get 50% in 30 minutes. Now MagSafe is available for all the iPhone 12 models this year, and I've been using it, and I have some mixed thoughts on it. While it's available and it's convenient, it charges at 15 watts on the 12 Pro Max. I think it's really nice, but it's not for everyone. If you already have a Qi-compatible wireless charger, keep that and keep charging like that. If you need a wireless charger that's centered, charges a little bit faster, and you want to use your phone while you're actually charging, well then yes, go ahead and pick one up because they're convenient. However, I handed one to my wife to use with a 12 Pro, and she actually didn't like it. She decided to go back to her other phone or her other charger with her phone because when you put it down, you can just pick it back up. With MagSafe, you have to physically disconnect it. I know that's kind of nitpicking at that, but it is something that some people will notice and maybe an inconvenience. So if you need it to stick to something somewhere, of course you can just use MagSafe. If you don't care about that, then I might skip it this year. Now this year, all iPhone 12s get 5G. Now in the United States, we have millimeter wave, and this is really only for Verizon customers and some AT&T customers. It really doesn't affect me as I don't have either of those carriers, but if you have Verizon and you're in the right city, on the right street corner, you may be able to get those fast speeds. However, regular sub-6 5G or 5G in general is pretty fast depending on where you live. Where I live, it's about double the speed of what we get with LTE. So the phone will automatically intelligently switch between 4G or LTE and 5G. And as you can see here, the LTE speeds are about half of what I was getting with 5G. So 5G is definitely beneficial where I live, but it's not for everyone yet. So I wouldn't run out and pick up the iPhone 12 Pro Max or any of the iPhone 12s just for 5G. There's a lot of other benefits to pick one up for, but 5G is not something I would just run out and have to upgrade for, but it's nice to have the future-proofing when it's everywhere and widely available. Now, should you pick up an iPhone 12 Pro Max? Well, that really depends on what your use case is. If you need a really long all-day battery, well then sure, pick one up. However, this may be way too big of a phone for most people. It's really hard to convey in these videos how big this is or how big it feels due to the squared off edges. It's a huge phone, and I may just use the iPhone 12 Pro this year, and I've used the iPhone 12 Pro Max, the iPhone 6S Plus since it came out, or the 6 Plus, and this one just feels huge compared to all of those. So I'm still debating which one's going to be my normal phone every day, but this may or may not be the best choice for you. Let me know what you think of the overall quality of the camera and microphone in the comments below. Like I said, I recorded this entire video using the rear-facing camera of the 12 Pro Max, and so I'd love to hear your thoughts about it in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on the wallpaper I used throughout the video, of course I'll link that in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.